Hello everyone, my name is Ashwin Mahalinga. I'm a professor at IIT Madras and also a part of IIT Madras's School of Sustainability. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about sustainability. So most of you are here because you're going to train people in some sense to develop games around sustainability. And in order for that to happen, you need to know a couple of things. You need to know how you develop games, but you also need to sort of understand a little bit about sustainability so you can embed sustainability aspects within these games. And so people who play these games then learn more about sustainability, which I guess is the whole objective of this project. So I've got here a series of 4 short videos which will help you, I think, understand a few important concepts relating to sustainability. First, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what is sustainability. So you sort of understand what kinds of elements could you potentially incorporate in your games. We'll talk a little bit about how you measure sustainability. I assume that in several games there will be some kind of a scoring system and therefore measurements are important. We'll talk about a third concept called circularity, which I think is critical to achieving sustainability. And then finally, I want to sort of introduce this notion of sustainability as a systemic problem, because I feel the best games around this will be where the games that are designed sort of as a system of many interconnected parts, right, where making small changes here could have ramifications elsewhere, and there's a complexity that is attached to sustainability that I think we need to capture in these games, right? So this is sort of the outline. So let me start with the first video, all right? And the first video is, or the first topic, let's say, is to get into a little bit of a discussion on what is sustainability, right? So you understand what you can potentially model in your games, okay? So about, in 1987, as this quote says, there was something called the World Commission on Dams, and there was a group there called the Brundtland Commission, headed by this lady called Brundtland, who I believe was from Norway. And the Brundtland Commission came up with what has since then been the canonical definition for sustainability, the most popular definition of sustainability. Of course, sustainability as a concept has been in existence for decades, right? But the Brundtland Commission defined sustainability as follows. They said, or sustainable development as follows. They said sustainable development is development, and this is now important, that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? So this is very critical. It's about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future. So in other words, if I have a resource like oil, which takes a very long time to regenerate, the more oil I consume, the less oil is left for future citizens of the future. And therefore, that is not sustainable because at some point I will run out of oil. On the other hand, sunlight, I mean, we are unlikely to run out of sunlight for, thousands of millions of years, right, until the sun sort of dies. And therefore, by using sunlight, I do not deprive future generations of the same source of energy. And therefore, that is considered to be more sustainable, right? So I think this is a powerful definition of sustainability, which again can potentially be incorporated into the way games are designed. So in other words, players do better when they do things today that satisfy the needs of today, but also don't compromise the needs of the future. And players who do a little bit of the opposite, satisfy the needs of today, but compromise the needs of the future, may therefore score lower in some of these kinds of games, right? So I think that's an important aspect to think about when you look at sustainability, all right? Around the same time, people said, okay, this is a definition, but it's very qualitative. How do I operationalize sustainability? And therein came this notion of the triple bottom line, right? And the triple bottom line essentially says there are 3 aspects to sustainability. That's why it's called the triple bottom line. Aspect 1, and this is the most common aspect that we all think about, is that sustainable development is environmentally friendly, right? So we are not emitting carbon dioxide, we are not polluting the air, we are not polluting the rivers. If you are environmentally friendly, you are sustainable, right? But the triple bottom line says there are 2 other important aspects to sustainability, right? One is economic growth or economic performance. for something to be sustainable, it should also be adding economic value, right? As human beings, we live in societies that are driven by principles of economics, supply, demand, costs, revenues, things like this. So when I do something, when I install a new factory, when I build a new building, when I do something, right, not only do I have to be environmentally friendly, I also need to be adding economic value. Okay, that's the second dimension of sustainability. And the third dimension of sustainability is what people call social equity, which is that not only am I adding economic value, I am contributing to the generation of wealth for society. Not only am I conserving the environment, I am also benefiting people directly in an equitable manner, right? And when you put all three things together is when you get truly sustainable development, right? Where wealth increases, people benefit, and the environment is preserved, or the environment is affected as little as possible. All right. So this triple bottom line is in some ways just a slightly different way of looking at the Brundtland definition. So Brundtland definition says what is sustainable development. If you say what do I need to do or how do I become sustainable, the idea is to follow this triple bottom line. Conserve the environment, figure out solutions that add economic value, and figure out solutions that are socially equitable. All right. And again, this could be a useful way of thinking about sustainability as people design games in terms of, are these strategies doing all three of these, or are these strategies just doing one, right? For instance, they're only adding economic value, or they're only protecting the environment and things like that, right? So to give you an example, if you have a forested area, right? Forests, by the way, also provide a lot of jobs, right, for people. There are people who take products from the forest. Honey, for instance, right, is typically found in forests where you have a lot of bees in certain areas and things like that. So sustainable development also provides jobs, creates value, things like this. So now if you have a forest area where no activity is allowed, environmentally it's very friendly, right? You're not affecting the forest. But people may lose some of those jobs that they had or sources of income that they had because of, for example, being able to collect honey from the forest and things like this, right? So again, maybe games that blend all of these elements tend to lead to better performance, or strategies in games, strategies that blend these kinds of elements tend to lead to better performance versus other kinds of strategies that might only focus on one or two of these could potentially lead to weaker performance, right? So that's another sort of idea to think about, and that's another way to think about sustainability. Today, people talk about something called the SDGs. Many of you have probably heard of this term, right? The Sustainable Development Goal. Right? Goals. There are 16 goals, and then there is of sustainable development, and then there is a 17th overarching goal, which is to ensure that we create partnerships to enable all of these 16 goals. But the idea is that if we can do well on these 16 parameters, right, then we are doing very well sustainably. So you can read this, you can go Google this, you will see some of these parameters: eradicate poverty, make sure there is good health and well-being, gender equality, good quality water for everybody, decent work and wages, energy, right? A bunch of these kinds of sustainable development goals have been identified. All right. Now, why is this relevant? One, again, you could potentially score people against how they did on various SDGs, right? You can score people on how many SDGs their strategies are able to affect. So if a particular strategy is able to address 10 SDGs, that's obviously much better than a strategy that addresses only 1 or 2 SDGs, right? So that's one way of looking at it. But very interestingly, to connect this with the triple bottom line, right? These SDGs can actually be split into the 3 aspects of the triple bottom line. So social, economic and environmental. As you can see, some of the social aspects of sustainability as enshrined in the SDGs are ensuring there is good quality education, health and well-being, gender equality, things like this, right? From an economic perspective, are we providing decent jobs? Is there economic growth? Are we providing infrastructure that enables economic growth? Things like that. And of course, from an environmental perspective, are we providing clean energy, not emitting carbon into the atmosphere, clean water, that's missing from this, climate action, life on land, life on water, things like this. All right. So these are, what you could potentially do is to say, look, you can have strategies that address SDGs. The more SDGs they address, the better, right? Perhaps. But also, you can look at these SDGs and sort of evaluate whether people are addressing social aspects, economic aspects, and environmental aspects. And if they are, then perhaps the performance in their games is better. So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody does something that addresses all 6 of these SDGs. All right. That may not be as good as somebody who addresses these 3, all right, but addresses one from each layer. I mean, I'm just giving you guys ideas, but sustainability can in some sense be broken down into these SDGs, and that's a way in which you can evaluate players. And a particular configuration of SDGs might be that straddle social, economic and environmental aspects might be more powerful as a sustainability strategy than a set of strategies that just sort of cherry pick some of these SDGs and things like this. Okay. So with that, I'm going to conclude this small segment. I hope you now have a little bit of an idea of what sustainability is, how we might I find identifiers or indicators for sustainability, and the triple bottom line and the SDG framework I think are very powerful. And hopefully you can use these ideas a little bit as you design ways in which players do well or players do badly in these kinds of games. Okay, so thank you. We'll conclude the first segment here.